Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. So, guys, as we take a look deeper and deeper, trying to put more and more puzzle pieces together, we're just faced with so many just interesting things that keep popping up when we start looking. So, many of you have probably seen Genesis 6, and this is out of the King James Version. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is also flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. Pretty straightforward right there, right? The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown, right? So, there's so many things that have been just accepted. Like some people will look at something and accept it because they just want to maintain their personal vision, of the way that the world is, the universe is, and what's happening. When you look at that, those were the men of renown. Okay, well, what is renown? Its synonyms are fame, distinction, eminence, preeminence, prominence, repute, reputation, prestige, acclaim, notability, consequence, standing, stature. I mean, it's not a negative thing. It's actually something that's kind of positive. So is that not curious? Because as we look at this, again, when the sons of God, or if we look in some translations, when the sons of the gods came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Okay, well, that's not bad, but the very next line, and God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of his thoughts in his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and he grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, who I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and creeping thing, and fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eye of the Lord. And then it gets into the flood story. So, something's missing when you look at that. It just doesn't make sense that, okay, so the sons of the gods had sex with mortal women, which actually, when you look at some of the DNA that we have gotten from some of these abnormal skulls, tests and shows that there's a missing paternal line there. And isn't that curious? But here it says the children were the mighty men, which were of old, men of renown, men of great stature, men of great consequence. Not evil. So there's something wrong there. Something's missing. There's a piece of the story that just doesn't go. Because again, renown doesn't have any sort of negative consequences with it. Then the very next step, it goes into the giants. And so we know of the book of Enoch. And this is the book of the Watchers, which is the oldest part of the book of Enoch, which dates to maybe 100 to 200 and something BC. So keep that in mind. And so this is supposedly written by Enoch, and it talks about the same sort of situation here. And when you start really reading it, and honestly, I got to tell you guys, I was so into the Bible for the longest time and have studied it my whole life, but I've studied outside of it now because, it's not that big. It really is not that big a book. And I've shared with you like my medical QiGong books, of which there's 5 volumes, each one's 600 to 1,000 pages. The Bible's not that big. It doesn't take much time to go through it. And I used to always cross-reference it with as many translations as possible. Now we could do that online. I used to have a dozen different Bibles, basically trying to cross-reference and see what are they really saying here. And when we look at it and then we read the Sumerian myths, then we could really see what's going on here. So here it's interesting too, because it says the great Holy One will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread from thence upon Mount Sinai, and appear with his army. He will appear with his mighty host from the heavens of heavens. All the watchers will fear and quake. So, I mean, it sounds pretty physical. It sounds, kind of interesting when you look at it. And, it gets into the whole Watchers situation and the rebellion of the Watchers. And here we see chapter 6 again. Interesting. When the sons of men had multiplied in those days, beautiful and comely daughters were born to them. And the Watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the daughter of men, and let us beget children for ourselves. So people will say, well, they're fallen angels. But what is an angel? Define an angel for me. What is an angel? Well, out of the original Greek, that we have in the New Testament, it's basically messenger. That's what it translates to, is a messenger. So, people say they're fallen angels and they're demons, but then they don't define exactly what is a demon. Can you give me a definition of a demon? Give me a definition of an angel. You're just saying what you've heard countless times by your pastors, by your priests, but not thinking, okay, well, what is this actually? Is this an interdimensional being? Is it somebody that's fourth density? Is it some sort of nature spirit? What is it exactly? Is it an extraterrestrial? Okay, well, is it a Draco? Is it a Gray? Is it a reptilian? Is it a Pleiadian, an Arcturian, Andromedan? What is it? You're not defining anything. You're just giving something a blank label and you're not saying what it is. Because you don't know. That's the bottom line. So you have to look deeper than that. And so many people they just won't look deep, but yet they'll just do the repetitive thing like a parrot. And without really thinking for themselves. So when you look at this, there's so much more detail here. And Shemhaza, the chief of the Watchers, right, said to them, I fear that you will not want to do this deed, and I alone shall be guilty of this great sin. So, I mean, it's so easy to see this as humanoid beings that are perhaps on some sort of assignment, and they're watching, and they see other humanoid beings, and perhaps they're lonely, and hey, life looks like it could be kind of good down here instead of up here in the spaceship or in the moon, space, whatever it is. So when we read this, we get that kind of vision. So they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and let us all bind one another with a curse, that none of us turn back from this counsel until we fulfill it and do this deed. So they all swore together and bound one another with a curse, and there they were, all of them, 200, who descended in the days of Jared onto the peak of Mount Hermon. So they're obviously physical beings, if this story is true. And not just simply an allegory, physical beings coming down from up there onto Mount Hermon. And they called the mountain Hermon because that's where they swore and bound one another with a curse on it. And then it gets into the names of them. And then it talks about them choosing wives as they chose. And then they started to have sex with them and defile themselves through them and to teach them sorcery and charms. But, again, is sorcery and things like that, is that just simply science that people that are not, as well educated and don't understand these things, they just don't simply know yet? And so they conceived from them and bore them great giants, and the giants begot Nephilim, and the Nephilim born Eliud, and they were growing in accordance with their greatness. So it's interesting there. They were devouring the labor of all the sons of men, and men were not able to supply them. And then the giants began to kill men and devour them. And yes, there are legends of these type of giant beings all over, and there's a lot of legends amongst the Native Americans that, yeah, they would be man-eaters as well. They would actually take the women, sometimes have sex with them, and also devour people, literally, devour them and eat them. So it seems like we have different types of beings here, coming out of these unions. And then they began to sin against the birds and the beasts and creeping things and the fish, and to devour one another's flesh. And they drank their blood. And then the earth brought accusation against the lawless ones. And it gets into a lot of them and what type of things they taught. They taught astrology. They taught war. They taught, everything you could think of, how to put on makeup and things. And then it comes into the intercession of the 4 archangels, which is really curious because the archangels are very interesting, because there is the thought that there is the angelic realm. And of course, we have what we would call the Davic realm, or, it's kind of synonymous with the angelic realm. So there are these beings that are most definitely more multidimensional, higher dimensional. And, we've had so many people that have had angelic type of encounters. And for those of you that are familiar with the idea of elemental beings, beings that are intelligent, but they are intelligent on the most rudimentary of levels, being made of only one element, such as earth, air, fire, or water. And so the thought is that beings like that, like the elementals, they will advance in time and turn into a higher level of consciousness, perhaps an animal, like a dog or something like that, and then eventually go into a higher form of consciousness after that, perhaps humanoid, and then evolve into something higher, which would be more like what we think of archangels and angels being. Because there's different things going on here if we look really closely, because some of these beings definitely appear physical. Now there's also multidimensionals as well, and the thought of multidimensionality, where some beings can control their ability to become physical and non-physical. So if you have a 4th density being that can slow down their vibration, change their vibration enough so that they could appear physical, materialize in the 3D, perhaps that is what you have going on here as well. So getting back to this, you have 4 of the archangels basically coming down and putting things in order and locking away till the end of time these watchers. And it's pretty interesting, and I've read this dozens and dozens of times, going back 30 plus years. So when we get into the Sumerian side of things, again, this is probably from this Book of Enoch, the Book of the Watchers. You're looking at probably 100 BC, maybe 200 BC, somewhere in that range. Then when we look at the Sumerian myths, they're going back 2000 BC. So they're going back, way back, and possibly even farther back than that. And so it's really interesting to see how things are changed a little bit, but are still talking about the same story. So this is Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And no, this is not translated by Zecharia Sitchin. For those of you that just want to say Zecharia Sitchin is a 33rd degree Mason and everything is, you can't believe him, this is not translated by Sitchin. There's hundreds of people, thousands of people have been working on translating these for many, many decades. And there's hundreds of thousands of fragments of this, and there's so much depth. There's so much more to it. So Gilgamesh says to Utnapishtim, and Utnapishtim is basically the Sumerian Noah. And some think that Noah wasn't purely human, like he had some of the Watchers in him. Perhaps he was one of those men of renown, as they're saying. And so Gilgamesh, this is the account of the Great Flood, and this is from the tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. He says, I have been looking at you, but your appearance is not strange. You are like me. You yourself are not different. You are like me. My mind was resolved to fight with you, but instead my arm lies useless over you. Tell me, how is it that you stand in the assembly of the gods and have found life? So interesting, because it goes in lines with these assembly of the gods that we see in Greek mythology, Roman mythology, so many other mythologies as well, and it's in the Bible. If you look at Deuteronomy 32:7, remember the days of long ago. Think about generations past. Ask your father, he will inform you. Inquire of your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High assigned lands to the nations. So when the top being of these classification of beings assigned the lands to the nations, when he divided up the human race, he established the boundary of the people according to the number of his heavenly court. And in some translation, it even is translating like assembly of the gods. And there's so much more detail in these older stories. Because again, the Bible is a cliff note, and it's an edited cliff note because they didn't want us figuring out the bigger picture. So, it's really interesting. Utnapishtim says to Gilgamesh, I will reveal to you a thing that is hidden, a secret of the gods I will tell you. Surupak, a city that you surely know, situated on the bank of the Euphrates. That city was very old, and there were gods inside it. So the gods were mingling amongst us. And when we look at legends across the globe of the ancient and shining ones, because they would shine and shimmer, interesting, perhaps, again, multi-dimensional. The hearts of the great gods moved them to inflict the flood. Their father Anu uttered an oath. Valiant Enlil was their advisor. Nintura was the chamberlain. Enugi was the minister of canals. Ea, Enki. Ea is his name. He becomes Enki, which means basically ruler of the earth. The prince was under oath with him. And by the way, his symbol is the serpent. So you could see that Ea Enki is the serpent of the Bible. And isn't it interesting, too, that the serpent of the Bible tells them about the, don't eat of the tree of knowledge, otherwise you'll be just like the gods. You'll understand. Interesting. And again, it's written, ye are gods, because you're of the seed of the gods. Because these beings, if they're able to pass on their DNA through sperm, obviously they have a physical component. And whether that physical component is there 24/7, 365, and on Earth, may be different from wherever they are from, Nibiru, wherever else. But either way, they're able to take a physical component and pass on the DNA and the genetic material. So, very fascinating when we look at all this. So, Ea, Enki, the prince was under oath with them, so he repeated their talk to the reed house. Reed house, wall, O man of Surupak, son of Ubar-Tutu, tear down the house and build a boat. Abandon wealth and seek living beings. Spurn possessions and keep alive living beings. Make the seed of all living beings go up into the boat. The boat which you are to build, its dimensions must measure equal to each other. So anyway, it's very much the biblical story, but it gets into a lot more detail and a lot more going on. Arguments amongst the gods, Enlil and Enki. Many believe that Enlil is kind of like one side of the God of the Bible, and Enki is the other side. And so it's a very interesting thing as we delve into it. And I have the PDFs for you guys to check out. And what's also interesting is like when we see all this stuff all around us, and we start looking at other traditions. So a legend among the Hopis state there was once a great temple city of wisdom built by the star people. Star people. Do you think that could be the Watchers? Do you think that could be the shining ones? The Kachinas. Interesting. Blue Kachina, red Kachina. When the Kachinas take their masks off and reveal themselves. When the star people reveal themselves. If we look at things, we could start putting things together pretty easily. Many of the Hopi clans visited this city during their respective migrations throughout the Americas and later shared stories of it when all the clans reunited at their final destination on the Hopi Mesas. And the Hopi Mesas, again, are towards the northeastern part of Arizona. And the mysterious city, known as Palakt Wapi, the Red House, was where the star people taught important rituals and secrets of the universe that are still enacted and honored by the clans. And over the last 100 years, there's been much speculation regarding this location of this city, and an abundance of ethnographers have located it in the Sedona Verde Valley region. Interesting, and it would make sense because it feels, and I was just there like 6 weeks ago, it feels different there. There's an energy there that feels extremely high vibrational, really high vibrational, and like you're looking at something sacred. Almost as if you're on a different world at times, looking at something so sacred. And the location, according to the Hopi, was to the southwest of Hopi Land, and that's exactly where Sedona is. And this is Cathedral Rock, which we did climb on up to the base. And it was definitely beautiful, and you could feel the vibration. And so it matches the descriptions. And so this was a city of the gods. Pretty fascinating stuff, but it's all kind of making sense. And, there's so many different cultures talk all about the same things. And we have Mother Shipton, who was Christian, talking about, the dragon and the dragon's tail and the destruction coming upon the earth and the end times. But then it's going to be a new golden age coming. And this is towards the end of Mother Shipton's prophecy. And before the race is built to new, a silver serpent comes to view, and spew out men of like unknown to mingle with the earth now grown, cold from its heat, and these men can enlighten the minds of future man, to intermingle and to show them how to live and love and thus endow the children with the second sight. Now that's your pineal gland, which is awakening in so many of us right now. And we have second sight. We are able to now communicate with these interdimensional, multidimensional beings again. And so much has been done to keep us from being able to do that. From fluoride in the water and fear-based, mentality. It goes on and on. But that's all ending now. So as it continues, the children with the second sight, a natural thing so that they might grow graceful, humble, and when they do, the golden age will start anew. So these beings help to bring about a golden age each time after this destruction happens. And so what we have is really that the ruling, controlling powers that be know that these other benevolent beings are coming again. It's just a matter of time. So they know their time is short, and they're doing everything they can to keep the message from getting out, to keep us divided, to keep us in the dark, keep us from seeing the bigger picture. But as we can see, we can put the puzzle pieces together and we can see the bigger picture. And it's not as dark as we're being led to believe. We are being led to believe things are hopeless, helpless, that we are born into original sin. We don't have any worth without them. We need them. We have to basically put them up on pedestals and treat them as if they are the gods themselves. But that's not the case. That's just what has been going on for the past several thousands of years. But we are waking up and we know the bigger picture. And many of us are going within and finding that truth from going within, and also connecting and understanding the bigger picture. So my friends, I look forward to your comments. As always, like, share, please do subscribe and click the bell. As we know, there's so much going on as far as censorship and trying to stop these words from going out, and we know who's doing it too. It's really obvious. And thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon as they keep trying to snuff out the life out of these channels. Thank you, my friends. God bless and namaste.